There's a moment in every connection, romantic or otherwise, when silence speaks louder than anything you could ever say. And when that silence comes from you, it shakes him. Not because you said something cruel, not because you begged, but because you finally said nothing. That silence, it's powerful. It's magnetic. It's the kind of quiet that fills his mind with questions, with memories, with thoughts he never had when you were always there, replying, reassuring, or reaching out. This isn't about playing games. It's about reclaiming your energy. Because when a woman who once gave so much of herself decides to go quiet, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, everything changes. That silence becomes a mirror, and what he sees in it can haunt him, confuse him, drive him wild. Why? Because you're no longer giving him what he expected. And now, he's the one wondering. When you go silent, it creates a disruption in the pattern he's used to controlling. For a long time, maybe you were always the first to text back, the one to initiate plans, the one to chase clarity or closure. You were the consistent presence. You gave him emotional rhythm, whether he admitted it or not. Every time he acted distant or unsure, you were there to soothe the uncertainty, to fill the space with words, reassurance, or emotional effort. But once you stop, once your voice vanishes from his daily routine, he doesn't just notice the absence, he feels it in a way that unsettles him. He had a predictable grip on how things were playing out. Whether it was conscious or unconscious, he was in the driver's seat. Your energy was responding to his pace. If he pulled back, you leaned in. If he gave you breadcrumbs, you turned them into a meal. This gave him a sense of quiet control. And whether he was confused, unsure, or even carelessly enjoying your presence without valuing it, he still knew it was there until it wasn't. Silence interrupts that emotional power dynamic, and it does it without confrontation. There's no drama, no heated exchange, no teary goodbye, just stillness. A stillness that speaks volumes. That sudden shift from constant communication to nothingness throws him off balance. It's like his favorite song suddenly stopping mid-chorus. And in that gap, he doesn't hear peace. He hears his own thoughts, and they're louder than ever. Now he starts to ask questions, not out loud, but internally. Why hasn't she reached out? Is she upset? Has she moved on? Did I lose her? These thoughts wouldn't surface if the pattern remained unchanged. But silence forces the mind to dig. When you pull away, he has to confront the absence of what once made him feel desired, needed, or important. He can no longer rely on your reaction to validate his position in your life. This is where curiosity transforms into obsession. Before, he was comfortable. Your presence was guaranteed. He didn't have to work for your attention. It was simply there. But now, with your silence, he loses that mental safety net. And that's when the tables turn. He begins to feel what you once felt: uncertainty, doubt, and longing. Silence becomes your power because it's not empty. It's filled with meaning. It forces him to stop underestimating your value. When you remove your voice from the narrative, you stop feeding his ego. You stop being a reflection of his desirability. That means his emotional rhythm gets disturbed. He may try to distract himself, tell himself it's fine, maybe even go out with someone else, just to prove to himself that he's unbothered. But it doesn't last, because he still doesn't have what he truly wants: control over your attention. And now that he's lost it, he can't stop trying to figure out how to get it back. You didn't disappear to manipulate him. You withdrew because you were done over giving. You were done being on call for someone who didn't fully show up for you. And in doing so, you restored your energy. But here's the part he didn't expect. Your silence didn't just end a conversation. It started a psychological shift. One he feels every day. He may not show it. He might post like everything is fine. He might even act like your absence doesn't matter. But inside, the silence is working, quietly, relentlessly. He starts to replay moments, not just the good ones, but the ones where he ignored your message for hours. The times he acted indifferent, the nights you cried while he slept peacefully, unaware or uninterested. Now those moments echo in the silence. He feels them. He sees what he couldn't see when he had you. And that's what happens when someone realizes the cost of your presence after it's gone. There's a very specific kind of regret that creeps in when someone loses something they didn't treat well. It's not instant, it builds slowly. It starts with curiosity, grows into concern, and eventually becomes desperation. But it only happens when you remove yourself completely, not halfway, not with mixed signals. When your silence is clear, intentional, and consistent, he feels the full weight of what he lost. And the most powerful part, you didn't scream. You didn't beg. You didn't explain. You didn't make him understand your worth. You let him feel it. In the space your silence creates, he's left alone with his conscience. And that is far more confronting than any words you could have spoken. Because words can be denied, argued, or dismissed. But silence lingers. Silence has weight. Silence invites reflection. So now, he's in a loop, trying to figure out how someone who once gave him so much could suddenly give him nothing. And that question doesn't just live in his head, it lives in his heart. Because once someone tastes genuine presence and then experiences the void it leaves behind, it's almost impossible to ignore. That's the beauty of your silence. It's not passive, it's powerful, it's not weak. It's your decision to stop explaining your worth and start letting him discover it on his own, in the dark, without your help. And once a man starts to feel the effects of that silence, he's not just thinking about you casually. You're on his mind constantly. In the morning, during the day, at night, not because you chased him, but because you finally stopped. And sometimes stopping is the loudest thing you can ever do. Silence creates mystery. And mystery for the male brain is like an itch that won't go away. When you are communicating, whether through words, affection, or attention, you are giving him access to your thoughts, your moods, your emotional temperature. He may not have realized it consciously, but he had a steady stream of information that gave him comfort. That information made him feel in control. He knew where you stood. He knew how to interpret your responses. And that knowledge gave him power. But once you go silent, you pull that access away. And suddenly he's not just curious, he's consumed. When someone knows everything, they stop wondering. But the moment you introduce uncertainty, their imagination comes alive. That's exactly what happens when you stop speaking, stop texting, stop explaining. He starts wondering where you are, what you're doing, who you're talking to, and why you're no longer available to him in the way you once were. And those questions don't bring peace, they bring obsession, because the human mind is wired to solve problems, and you've now become one. But not in a bad way, in the most magnetic way possible. He starts replaying old conversations, reading between the lines, analyzing things you said weeks or months ago that he never thought twice about. He starts overthinking your last message. Was there a clue? Was it cold? Was it a goodbye? Why didn't he see it coming? And the irony is, he probably thought he was the one who had the upper hand. But when the talking stops and you disappear from his radar, he realizes just how much mental space you actually occupy. The silence turns into a puzzle, and people love puzzles, especially when they can't solve them. That's what makes mystery so attractive. When you're not revealing anything, your emotions, your location, your intentions, he starts to create stories. Maybe you're seeing someone new. Maybe you finally moved on. Maybe you woke up one day and realized he wasn't enough. The truth doesn't even matter at that point. His mind fills in the gaps with every possibility, and each one leads him back to the same thought. You. Before, he didn't have to guess. You were consistent. You checked in, showed care, made time, responded quickly. He could rely on that. He could almost take it for granted. But now, he's the one pacing, refreshing his phone, wondering if you're online, imagining you laughing at someone else's jokes. The silence has made you unpredictable, and that unpredictability makes you irresistible. We all chase what we can't fully understand. Think about it. The moment someone becomes too available, too transparent, too easy to read, we lose a little interest. But when someone becomes quiet, composed, and hard to read, they suddenly seem deeper, more valuable, more powerful, and you, by going silent, have become that person. You didn't have to post cryptic quotes or stage stories to make him jealous. You just had to stop feeding the narrative he was used to. And now his curiosity has turned into craving. He might not admit it. He may even try to act unbothered. But silence doesn't need validation to work. It works because it forces him to face himself. Every time he picks up his phone and doesn't see your name, it triggers a response. A little hit of disappointment, a little stab of confusion. And that's where the addiction starts. Because now he's looking for something he no longer has access to, and the more he doesn't get it, the more he wants it. Mystery also makes him start to project. He starts to wonder if he messed up. Did he say something wrong? Was he too distant? Did he miss a sign that you were pulling away? And now, every image of you that once felt secure starts to slip through his fingers. He starts to see you as someone he can't reach, someone who's no longer emotionally available to him, someone who's potentially moved beyond him. That shift in perception changes everything. You go from the girl he thought he could always count on to the woman he might have lost forever. And it's not just that he misses the conversations. He misses the connection. He misses the way your attention made him feel, the way you laughed at his jokes, the way you cared even when he didn't fully appreciate it. And now that all of that is gone without explanation, he feels unsteady. He's no longer sure where he stands with you. That insecurity is exactly what makes you stick in his mind. Over and over again. People chase closure, they chase explanation. But when you give none, when you exit gracefully and go silent with strength, you become unforgettable. Because you didn't need to scream. You didn't need to prove anything. You let your absence speak. And it's saying everything he was too blind to hear when you were present. That mystery, that question mark you left behind, becomes more powerful than any love letter or angry text. It lives in his mind, rent-free. So if you're wondering why he's suddenly watching your stories, why he's texting at odd hours, why he's reaching out more now than when you were available, it's because your silence forced him into reflection, and that reflection turned into longing. You've become the mystery he can't solve, the answer he can't find. And in that space of not knowing, he's discovering just how much you mattered. Not because you reminded him, but because you vanished. And the mystery you left behind is driving him wild. When you choose to go silent, you don't just remove your voice, you remove your energy, your emotional investment, and your presence. That single act flips the entire emotional power dynamic between you and him. Because now, without you having to say a single word, he's forced to realize something that was easy to ignore before. You're not available anymore. Not emotionally, not mentally, not physically. You've reclaimed your power. And in doing so, you've shaken the foundation of what he thought was secure. This shift doesn't happen when you're still trying to convince him of your worth. It doesn't happen when you're arguing, over-explaining, or proving how much you cared. It happens the moment you stop. The moment you step back with quiet strength, you send a clear message. You're no longer emotionally accessible to someone who didn't value your presence. And that's when the dynamic flips. The person who once felt in control now begins to feel powerless. When you are emotionally available, responsive, nurturing, and invested, he had a certain confidence in how things were going. Even if he wasn't committing fully, even if he was inconsistent, he still knew you'd be there. He knew you'd answer, care, and hold space for him. That confidence allowed him to stay comfortable. But your silence pulls the rug out from under that comfort. It removes the safety net he didn't even know he was leaning on. Suddenly, the dynamic isn't one of him choosing when to engage. It's one where you have chosen to disengage entirely. And that, for someone who's used to having the upper hand, is deeply unsettling. There's something powerful about walking away without fanfare. No final warnings, no emotional pleas, no desperate goodbyes. Just quiet, intentional distance. That kind of exit doesn't just protect your peace, it reclaims your power. And it sends a signal to his subconscious that you no longer revolve around him. You're not waiting, you're not hoping, you've stepped back to honor yourself, and that changes everything. He now has to live with the consequence of your withdrawal. He's left to sit with the space you once filled, without the comfort of knowing he can reach out and get the same version of you back. This changes how he sees you, because people instinctively value what's scarce. When something is always available, it's easy to take it for granted. But the moment it becomes rare, or in this case silent, it suddenly seems more precious, more desirable, more important. You've gone from someone he was certain of to someone he no longer has access to. And that uncertainty forces him to reevaluate. He starts to ask himself questions he never had to ask before. Did I mess this up? Did she get tired of waiting? Why doesn't she care anymore? These questions don't just swirl in his head. They gnaw at his pride. Because deep down, whether he admitted it or not, he relied on your attention to feel significant. And now that it's gone, he realizes how much of your energy he was feeding off. This is when men start to panic, not always visibly, but internally. The silence becomes deafening. It's not just about missing your words or your voice. It's about the absence of your emotional investment. It's the realization that you no longer place him at the center of your world. And that loss of centrality is what drives the power shift. Because now he's the one feeling unimportant. He's the one wondering where he stands. He's the one thinking about you more than you're thinking about him. The beauty of this power shift is that you didn't need to manipulate or play games. You simply stepped out of a dynamic that no longer served you. You stopped handing your energy over to someone who wasn't giving the same in return, and in doing so, you've reminded him, and more importantly yourself, that your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see it. That change in mindset radiates in your silence. You're no longer looking for external validation. You're not asking him to realize your worth. You're living in it. And that quiet confidence is what speaks the loudest. It's what makes him feel the void. Because deep down, he knows you've shifted, you've evolved, you've moved into a space where you protect your energy, where you give only to those who truly deserve it. And here's the most important part. You're no longer reacting to him. When you were emotionally tied to the situation, your mood could shift based on his behavior. If he texted, you felt hopeful. If he ignored you, you felt hurt. But now you've detached. You're no longer riding the emotional roller coaster that his inconsistency created. You've stepped off. And from that place of clarity and calm, you now hold the emotional power. That's what makes your silence so impactful. You're not bitter. You're not angry. You're just done. And there's something incredibly attractive about a person who knows when to walk away, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. That kind of energy doesn't chase, it attracts, it doesn't beg, it sets standards. And those standards are exactly what make him realize how much he underestimated you. So if you're wondering whether your silence is being noticed, the answer is yes. Not only is it being noticed, it's being felt. Every day that passes without a word from you, he feels the balance tipping. He senses that you're no longer playing by his rules. And that realization is a wake-up call. Because once the emotional dynamic flips, once he sees you as the one who got away, not because he lost you, but because you chose to walk away, you become unforgettable. In the end, power isn't about control. It's about self-respect. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to beg someone else to see it. When you go silent, not to punish, but to protect your peace, you send a message that echoes louder than any words ever could. I know what I bring to the table, and I'm no longer offering it to someone who only shows up when it's convenient. That's not just powerful, that's magnetic. Silence forces him to confront what he's been avoiding. While you were still in his life, still communicating, still reaching out, he never had to sit with the weight of his actions or his lack of action. He didn't have to reflect on how he treated you, because your presence offered him a sense of forgiveness. Whether he consciously realized it or not, he felt like he had time. Time to figure it out, time to come around. Time to keep stringing you along without making a real decision. But when you go silent, that illusion of time collapses. Suddenly, there's no more room for delay. There's only one thing left: reflection. You've taken away the comfort of your emotional availability, and in doing so, you've created a mirror. One he can't look away from. It's no longer about what he thinks you felt or what he assumes you were willing to tolerate. It's about what he's actually done or failed to do. That space of silence becomes a vacuum, pulling in all the moments where he chose not to show up. Every ignored message, every cancelled plan, every time he left you guessing about where you stood. It all starts to replay in his mind like a loop he can't stop. This isn't the kind of realization that happens overnight. It builds gradually. At first, he might just think you're giving him space. Then he starts to wonder why it's taking so long. Then that silence becomes strange, unsettling. And finally, it becomes deafening. In that noise, the memories creep in. He remembers the way you were always there when he needed someone. The way you stayed loyal, even when you had every reason to walk away. The way you tried to make things work, even when he gave you crumbs. Now all of that effort becomes painfully visible, but only because you removed yourself. You see, as long as you were still communicating, he could keep avoiding accountability. He could tell himself that things were fine or that you were always going to be around. But your silence stripped away his ability to lie to himself. He can't blame the distance on you anymore. He can't pretend you're being overly emotional. You've taken away every excuse. And now he's left with the truth. He lost someone who genuinely cared, and it was his fault. That kind of realization isn't just sad, it's humbling. Because in that moment, he finally sees the difference between your presence and your absence. And often, people don't understand the depth of someone's value until it's no longer freely given. He thought your love was endless. He thought your patience would last forever. But silence has a way of making people understand what words never could. It shows them what life looks like without you in it. And if he truly cared, deep down, it breaks something in him. Now he begins to see what you saw all along. He notices how emotionally unavailable he was, how inconsistent, how careless. He starts to realize that your needs weren't too much. He was just unwilling to meet them. And the kicker is, you never had to scream these things at him. You never had to make a scene. You just stepped back quietly, firmly, and that decision forced him to face the consequences of how he treated you. This is also the moment he starts to understand the weight of your silence. It's not just you being quiet, it's you protecting yourself. It's you reclaiming the parts of you he kept taking for granted. And he starts to understand that you didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because he never cared enough to meet you halfway. That distinction cuts deep. It leaves him wondering what could have been if he had just appreciated you when he had the chance. The silence forces growth, but only for the one who's willing to reflect. If he's emotionally mature, he'll start to change. He'll begin to see that love isn't about being available when it's easy or convenient. It's about consistency. It's about effort. It's about showing up even when it's uncomfortable. And your silence, whether he says it or not, becomes the wake-up call that shakes him out of his emotional laziness. Even if he doesn't reach out, even if he never says a word, know this: your silence is working. It's doing what your words could never do. It's making him sit in the space where you used to be and realize just how empty it feels without your energy. That kind of confrontation is powerful because it holds a mirror up to his behavior and forces him to ask himself, why did I let her go? In some cases, that silence will inspire real growth. He'll step up, not just to get you back, but to become someone who no longer takes love for granted. In